Blog Talk Radio.
Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen, across this great country. It's Tuesday, and what we do is we move the Cleveland Cavaliers out of the equation. No talk about the Cleveland Browns. And we talk less right now about the Cleveland Indians because right now it's the American Sports History Podcast hosted by my good friend, my brother, my mentor, Peter Ray, live from Cleveland, Ohio. And he's got a special guest, so yours truly, Mark Mancini, producing this thing. 347-205-9631. Catch the archive version on blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports. Podcast platforms, whatever you might have, powered by Mancini Media. So as I lay the red carpet down, put the podium in its place, hand off the mic. He knows the way it's going. He's heard it before. First of all, Peter, how are you? Second of all, how can people reach you? And third of all, another legend coming through your show.
Hi, Mark. I'm doing very well. I'm on Facebook, Peter Ray, REA. I have a YouTube channel, Peter J. Ray. And you're absolutely right about tonight's guest. He's from Perth, New York, lives in East Greenbush, New York, and he's the host of Tgi Sports Talk. Welcome to the show, Mr. Keith Engle.
Thank you for having me today, Peter. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you on the show. First of all, Keith, can you tell us about your life in sports and about hosting Tgi Sports Talk?
Well, I grew up here in upstate New York, about 3.5 hours from New York City. Big Yankee fan growing up. Played sports, played some baseball in college and semi-pro. Always wanted to be do some kind of broadcasting, and went into the sales world and sales management world. And a while back, I got a chance to kind of on a whim host my own show called Tgi Sports Talk, and we do an interview show on Friday mornings, and we do a kind of a live stream of consciousness talking about the world of sports in general, and a lot of interaction with the audience for 2 hours on Sunday morning. The shows go live on Facebook. They go live on YouTube. They're on all the podcast channels, the audio as well, on such as whatever, iHeartRadio, all the big ones. And we just have a blast with it. And then I'm on some other shows as well, on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network, which is growing leaps and bounds, and it's lots of fun. And it's a kind of a dream come true to me late in life here, but I'm having a blast doing it. Love being on shows like yours and talking whatever sports we end up talking about for the day.
The thing about baseball is that it's so deeply rooted in the American psyche. It's such an important part of who we are of our culture, American people. And if you're into baseball and love the game, and then the history of baseball is so old, and no team has a greater history than the New York Yankees. I always tell people you might dislike the Yankees. Because, but I'm just in awe of the, and I know I think I told you I made a video on my favorite New York Yankee books. So can you talk about what it's like being a Yankee fan, and what are your thoughts on the Yankee history, tradition, and legacy?
Well, obviously it's a great legacy like no other in baseball, and really no other in sports when you think about it. With the number of championships that they won and the players that have come through that organization. I grew up, Peter, at a time when the Yankees were in quite a lull. As I was coming of age, paying attention to the game in the late 60s, early 70s. The Yankees had, they do get kind of a bad rap for as bad as they were, they call the Horace Clark years, obviously, right, 68 to 75. But they were in contention a couple of those years, but ran into some great Baltimore Orioles teams. But I grew up loving guys like Bobby Mercer and Roy White, and then they started to get better. And your Cleveland Indians, I can tell you, kind of, it goes under the radar a little bit as the Yankees started to get better in the 70s. The Indians help out with a couple of great trades and trading the great Greg Nettles and the underrated Chris Chambliss to the Yankees contribute greatly to those championship teams in the 70s. So thank you.
Oh, boy. Yeah, those are, I mean, I guess I did enjoy seeing Chris Chambliss put the Yankees in the '76 World Series, and those two guys being. In a way, I was kind of happy. They're former Cleveland players, but yeah, they were tremendous players, Greg Nettles and Chris Chambliss. And I'd like to go back. I know we only have a half an hour here, but I just love the Yankee history and going back to Babe Ruth. I don't know if I haven't read the latest book on Ruth, The Big Bam, and then there's the movie with John Goodman, and just Babe Ruth, who made the home run popular and has such an amazing person. It's been 100 years, since his era, really, and he's still so well known. Do you want to talk about Babe Ruth?
Babe Ruth, the Babe. I haven't read the new book, but I've read almost every book ever written about Babe Ruth. I watch any documentary I can find. You remember a while back that ESPN did their documentary series. I can't remember what it was called now. Where they were ranking the greatest athletes of all time. And I said to myself, Babe Ruth has got to be number one, because every athlete today, whether it's a baseball player, basketball player, football, should thank their lucky stars that there was a Babe Ruth 100 years ago, as you said, or they wouldn't be in the position, in my mind, to be as famous as they are today and making the kind of money that they're making, if it wasn't for a guy like Babe Ruth, who was just larger than life and saved baseball, in my mind, after the 1919 Black Sox scandal. So all of baseball owes Babe Ruth a debt, and maybe all of sports.
One of my favorite quotes of all time is, "Today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth." Yeah. I think it's so important, in life we all deal with hardships, and it's so important to have a good attitude. And the quote by Lou Gehrig. What are your thoughts on the Iron Man, Lou Gehrig?
There's a record obviously we thought would never be broken, his consecutive game streak, and he played a lot of the end of that, obviously, with a severe disease, ALS, and which unfortunately, I guess for him, was named after him after that. But just a debilitating thing, but just a great guy. And again, one of my favorite movies to watch is the Lou Gehrig story with Gary Cooper. It's just a tremendous baseball movie, and you get to see, I think, of the humbleness of the difference between Ruth and Gehrig is striking, right? When you read about them and watch documentaries about them. But obviously, Gehrig was a great player in his own mind, yeah, right, in his own way. And it's a shame his career got cut short, because it'd be interesting to see where his numbers ended up without, the illness that struck him at, a fairly young age still.
That's what I love about the Yankees, just this whole sequence that you go through from over time, and moving along. Of course, a lot of guys get forgotten, but because there's just so many players in baseball. Moving along to Joe Dimaggio, the new. I don't know what you thought about the biography by Richard Ben Kramer, but Dimaggio comes in, the Yankee Clipper, and then the 50s. In Cleveland, there's still pride here about stopping his 56-game hitting streak, and this guy, a son of, the American story, a son of an Italian immigrant fisherman in San Francisco, and what are your thoughts on Joe Dimaggio?
Joe Dimaggio, great story, great ball player. One of the great stats, I think, in all of baseball is the fact, and especially when you compare it with the way the game is played today, Peter, is that Joe Dimaggio hit 3 more home runs than he struck out in his career. I believe it was 369 to 366. Imagine that today, right? Guys strike out 366 times in a season and a half today. That's all he struck out in his entire career, and he's hitting home runs and hitting, for high averages, and just such a great player, graceful player. In his later years, I think I don't know if he's been misrepresented or and his attitude and some of the things that he wanted to be, how he wanted to be remembered and how he wanted to be treated. But whatever you want to say about Joe Dimaggio, again, another great piece of not just Yankee history, but baseball history. And it just goes on, as you said. It rolls through the decades and the eras. We go from the three guys we've already talked about right to the next guy you're going to mention. I bet you I know who it is.
I think Mickey Mantle retired. I got a late start. I was born in '60. I became obsessed with baseball at the end of the '72 season. Mickey Mantle had retired by that time, but I got into the history, and a couple times I've seen the Bob Costas interview with him near the end of his life, and it's such a touching, incredible video, and it makes you just think so much about this guy, this simple guy, and all the pressure on him, and his father dying young, and we all can do better in life, but and him being his alcoholism, and to me, Mickey Mantle, I think for me the greatest athlete of all time, because he's fairly recent, and he just captured people's imagination, and so what are your thoughts on Mickey Mantle?
Well, I kind of am in the same boat as you. I mean, I became a fan, in the late 60s, early 70s. Mickey was retired. Mickey was around the Yankees. Obviously knew who Mickey Mantle was. I read the books, as soon as I was reading baseball books, I was reading everything I could about Mickey Mantle. And obviously become this larger-than-life character. And then you find out later on as you get older about, some of his faults that we all have. And as you mentioned, that interview where he opens up to Bob Costas late in his life and really has a lot of regrets about the way he lived his life and the way he treated his wife, his family. And you can't help but be moved by a guy who has that kind of feeling and is finally able to share it with people. You mentioned his father dying young, but no male member of Mickey's family had ever lived past 39, so he didn't think he would either, and that's why he kind of lived his life early on the way he did. And, his famous saying was, if I'd known I lived this long, I would have taken better care of myself. So, just another tremendous story in the Yankee lore. You
mentioned Pride of the Yankees. I think one of the greatest movies, with Garriga is to me one of the great. That's a tremendous movie, obviously, and then the more recent one, 61 Asterisk, that came out by Billy Crystal, and I was reading. I was reading about Roger Maris recently, and about how a sports writer was expressing regret for the way for his actions in the way Roger Maris was treated in 1961, and it was Maris died, I think, in '85, so he's been long gone. And I thought, well, it's better late than never. For it's always hard to admit you were wrong, especially when you're in a group of people. And so it's just incredible. I turned 61, so I think, Roger, everything is connected to baseball numbers. I think of six. Yeah. That's amazing. 61 home runs in 1960. Who could have planned that? What are your thoughts on Roger Maris?
It's funny. I just rewatched actually the Yankeeography on Roger Maris the other night, and it's what he went through that year. I mean, they were all pulling for Mantle to break the record, and they both might have broke the record if Mickey had stayed healthy that whole year. But the pressure just got more and more on Maris, and obviously the whole debacle with the commissioner deciding to, before it ever happened, that if he didn't break the record in 154 games, there was going to be an asterisk. So he was really getting close to the record in 154 games, but then he didn't get it. I think he was at 15. I think he was at 59 after 154 games. But the pressure he was under and the way he was treated was just, I find it unforgivable. I understand how people looked at Babe Ruth in New York, but Roger Maris was a really, really good ball player, especially those two seasons. He won back-to-back MVPs. It wasn't just in 61 rather. He had back-to-back MVP seasons, was a great defensive outfielder. And then when he got traded, I think he'd asked to be traded and went to the Cardinals. He really had a broken relationship with the Yankees until shortly before his death, when he came back finally for an old-timers game and They retired his number, and I was glad to see him get that before he passed away. He passed away at a very young age. I think he might have only been 51 years old. But again, great player, and I wish that he was better remembered by Yankee fans to this day.
Yeah, actually, he played for Cleveland, so beginning of his career.
Them, yeah.
So that's I take some pride in that. That's fun, and that he was here, and it was nice that he got a big. They really cheered for him at Yankee Stadium when he came back. He and Mantle went out, so that was really nice to. I remember. Also, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Peter. Also, another little thing about Maris when McGuire and Sosa were having the chase for the record in '97. Again, regardless of what you think about what was going on in baseball at that point in time, I thought when McGuire finally broke the record and the Maris family was there and he went up into the stands and hugging them all, it was just a great moment, I felt, for Roger Maris and for Roger Maris's family, for him to acknowledge them and him in the way that he did. So, regardless of everything else that went on, I thought it was a pretty classy move by Mark McGuire at that point in time.
Yeah, I've seen that, and it is, and I agree, because it's good to, I'm a historian, so and we tend not, as Americans, to be very historical, but it's important, and it's a matter of respect. So that was really beautiful that they did that and made the arrangements for them to come, and that he went over, and he was sincerely respectful of Roger Maris. And now moving along. I was in the late 70s. I think the Yankees, the 2 World Series titles. I think about those guys all the time. To be honest, I don't know. It's just, anyway. It's just burned in my memory. The Yankees, because the personalities, and They came out with the Bronx is Burning. This I don't know if it was ESPN. This TV drama.
It's funny. I just rewatched that miniseries not long ago too.
And when that came out, I thought, oh my God, this was made for me, because all those guys, Lou Piniella, and who actually played in Cleveland, and Mickey Rivers, a tremendous center and has speed. And I remember when the Yankees got Willie Randolph, I was like, what the hell? The Indians, in fact, in '76, we were in early July. We were, I think, 5 games out of first. And so, and then we had a 4-game series of Yankees in Cleveland. 200,000 fans came, and of course, we won the first. Yanks won the next 3. So anyway, we were a contender for a while there. And anyway, when they picked up Willie Randolph, I was like, dang, how did they get this? Look at this guy, and he's a tremendous defensive player, and he can hit, and he can run, and it's like, God. And they already had Chambliss and Nettles, and then they pick up, and then Catfish Hunter, I believe we had a shot at picking him up, but he goes to the Yankees, and then Reggie and Billy Martin and the whole Thurman Munson. So the late 70s Yankees, I've read a million, I lived through it. So what are your thoughts about the 1977-78 Yankees? Or 76 through 78.
Yeah, Peter, those teams, 76 was great, obviously returning to the playoffs. You had the Chambliss home run that you referred to earlier off Mark Littell to put the Yankees back in the World Series for the first time in 12 years, which for the Yankees was an eternity. But 77 and 78 are really my 2 favorite baseball seasons of all time. The things that went on in 77 when Reggie came there, and you talked about the Bronx is Burning, very good miniseries. If you haven't read the book, read the book, because the book is so much better than the miniseries. I can highly recommend that. And it chronicles that whole 77 season and all the craziness that went on with Reggie and Billy and the fight in Boston and almost when he pulled Reggie out of the game. But in the end, they find a way to pull it together. And Reggie hits the 3 home runs to win the World Series finally in 6 games against the Dodgers. But 78 is really the season that I loved. They're 14 and a half games back. Nobody gives them a chance. They fight back all the way back, get that 1-game playoff. Bucky Dent with, all due respect to Chris Chambliss, maybe the biggest home run Yankee history is hit by Bucky Dent in Fenway Park in that 1-game playoff. And just a tremendous World Series. Another again, I got to thank Cleveland again for Greg Nettles, because without Greg Nettles, the Yankees probably don't win the '78 World Series, because down 2-0. He makes about 5 great defensive plays that save at least 5 runs. Ron Guidry doesn't have his best stuff, and Greg Nettles turns the game around with his defense and not his bat. So just a tremendous memories for me. Those are my 2 favorite baseball seasons in my lifetime.
Well, and of course the Billy Martin saga went on and on. And when Billy Martin died, I was so I felt so bad because it was hard to believe that he wasn't going to manage the Yankees again. And that whole story of Martin and having a tough childhood, being driven, and then being a star for the Yankees in the '50s in a couple World Series, with a big hitting and a big play, and then sadly, tragically being traded, and then coming back and redemption, and the whole drama with Reggie Jackson and George Steinbrenner. Do you want to talk about Billy Martin?
Billy was really an interesting character. His own worst enemy, probably one of the best on-the-field managers, in-game managers, I think, in baseball. Great tactician. Turned every franchise he came to around very quickly. The Twins, the Tigers, the Rangers. Then the Yankees, they all became winners. They didn't all win divisions. Well, the Rangers didn't. Actually, the others all did. In pretty much Billy's first year at the helm. But Billy would, he'd turn these teams around, but just as quickly as he turned them around, he'd wear out his welcome just because of, his well, in New York, it was his inability to get along with George and with Reggie. He didn't want Reggie on the team. He wanted Joe Rudy, and he wanted to get Bobby Grichin. He didn't think they needed Reggie, and Billy was his own worst enemy, especially with the off the field stuff. And it's unfortunate, but George couldn't stay away from Billy. Those 2 guys were addicted to each other. George kept bringing Billy back right after he fired him in '78. It wasn't a week later at Old Timers Day, he's announcing that he'll be coming back as a manager in 1980. You can't make this stuff up, right? And you talked about his tragic death, and by all accounts, he was about to become the Yankee manager for the sixth time if he had not tragically passed away when he did in that accident.
I remember, just in reading about it. I guess I had a Paul Blair baseball card. He was a pretty good player, real good player for the Orioles in the mid '60s and the '66 team. And then I was watching that game. I think it was I'm not sure if Yankees Red Sox, where Paul Blair's headed out to right field in the middle of the half inning. He's with the Yankees reserve, and it's like, oh my God, and they're taking Reggie out of the game. And the thing is, with Reggie and Catfish, they were both on the A's, which to me was actually I was just obsessed with the A's because they win 3 World Series, and then those 2 guys come. So those 2 guys both win 5 with both teams. Reggie and Catfish. What are your thoughts on Reggie Jackson?
Reggie was a great ball player, a great hitter, a little bit overrated defensively when he got to New York, and it kind of showed, hence that game in Boston when he kind of loafed after a ball. But, Reggie, again, I think was his own worst enemy. He had to have the limelight, and I think it's taken away from what a great ball player he was. I mean, he was before his time, right? Home runs and strikeouts were Reggie's MO, and it was exciting to watch him do whatever he did. We talked about the 3 home runs in '77, but he had a couple of big home runs in '78, and he had a great battle with a young pitcher from the Dodgers, Bob Welch, who struck Reggie out. I don't remember which game it was. I didn't want to say it was Game 4 to end the game, and then Reggie came back to get even with him later on in that series. And that's the kind of guy that Reggie was. He became Mr. October because he would turn it on, when the lights were shining brightest. And he was a great player, and probably better than what people remember today because we remember all the other stuff that went on around him.
I was watching I think it was a Yankee Red Sox playoff game, maybe early 2000s, and Yankee Stadium, and the fan had a sign that said "Babe Bucky Buckner," and I thought, oh, look at that. Pretty big jump from Babe Ruth to Bucky Dent, and then Bill Buckner, of course. That's sort of making fun of it's talking about the Mets series when New York. Anyway, so it's nice having these historical things and to go with. And let's see, how about and then I was on an airplane and I read about the death of Catfish Hunter and that he got Lou Gehrig's disease and I thought, wow, this guy, and I was really upset. And what are your thoughts on Catfish Hunter?
Catfish brought he came to the Yankees in '75. He was a first free agent for different reasons than free agency became. It was, Charlie Finley had not fulfilled the terms of his contract with the donations to a charity. But him coming to New York, I would think really was the impetus of the revival of the Yankee franchise. And George Steinbrenner's first big imprint on the team. And Catfish was just a classy guy. Kind of the opposite of Reggie, two guys who came from that A's dynasty you mentioned. But Catfish was just a guy who wanted a baseball. You gave it to him. He expected to finish what he started, and he was a classy individual. I think he brought that winning attitude to the Yankees that had been lacking, that killer instinct that had been lacking maybe for the decade before. So I think he got the Yankees rolling in the right direction when Catfish got there. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see the best of Catfish. He won 23, 24 games his first year in '75, but his arm started to go after that. He did contribute to those championship teams, but not the way we remember Catfish with Oakland. And that's a little sad that happened, but Catfish is important to that era because, as I said, he got them rolling and brought a touch of class and a winning attitude to that ball club.
1973 was the first year of the designated hitter, and the first DH to bat was Ron Blomberg, and that has really led to him being famous for that. And of course, he did have a fine career, and he has a new book about Thurman Munson. What are your thoughts about? Remember when Thurman Munson? Another tragedy. What are your thoughts on Thurman Munson?
Oh, gosh. Thurman was another one of my favorites, when I was a kid. It was Bobby Mercer, Roy White, Greg Nettles, Thurman Munson. I remember that day when his plane crashed in '79. I was only 19 years old, but I'll never forget August 2nd, 1979. It felt like the world had ended in New York, and it was a sad week after that. The Yankees obviously were out of the race and were never going to get back in it with the captain gone, the heart of the team gone. He was a gritty ball player. Could be curmudgeonly at times, but he was misunderstood. If you read the book, which I have, I had Ron's co-author Dan Epstein on my show here a couple of weeks ago, and just a totally misunderstood person, Thurman. He was a great family man, a great ball player, but he just didn't want to be bothered with all the other stuff going around, the press and, some of the other nonsense that went on around baseball. And he wanted to get back to Cleveland. He probably would have if he'd lived. I think, Peter, you would have gotten to have Thurman back at some point in Cleveland where he grew up near, and that was his team when he was a youngster.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it at the time, and I was thinking, well, that would be pretty cool having Thurman Munson play for Cleveland. We have a minute left. The time has flown by talking all the Yankee history. Do you have any guests that you've had on your show that you'd like to mention?
Oh, gosh, I've had Ron Blomberg on. I've had Roy White on. We talked about Chris Chambliss. I had the pitcher who gave up that famous home run, Mark Littell. I've had Marty Appel, a longtime PR guy for the Yankees on my show. Trying to think who else we've had. Billy Martin Jr. was on the show. I can't think of anybody else right now that kind of fills the bill, but I mean, those are some pretty good guys. That Roy White's a great guy, great interview too. Had a lot of fun with him that day. Just a great, classy guy. He's another guy underrated in Yankee history is Roy White.
Well, I think about him a lot. He's a part of that group. He's Roy White. I think about all those guys, and because he played and he was quiet, but he didn't. But he was there, and he got good. He got the hits and the right clutch hits. Our guest has been Keith Engle. Do you have any final words for our audience, Keith?
Well, I've loved spending this time with you, Peter. I mean, we could talk about this era of the Yankees. I could, and I'm sure you could, for about 5 hours probably tonight. And it's a shame we only had 30 minutes. And maybe we'll find time to do it again.
Yeah, I appreciate it because, I can. Yankee history, the whole. You mentioned Bobby Mercer. I like to bring him up as the link between Mantle and Reggie because he was there, and the I remember that I read somebody mentioned the Horace Clarke, the Horace Clarke era. They thought, this is kind of disrespectful to Horace. I remember Horace Clarke. He was a good player. So anyway,
he was there. He gets miscast because of the team's situation at that time.
So anyway, I could. I'm half an hour. But it was wonderful to find somebody to talk about the history of the Yankees, late '70s Yankees. So keep up the good work at Tgi Sports Talk. Really wonderful having you on the show, Mr. Keith Engle.
Well, thanks for having me, Peter, and you enjoy the rest of your night.
Very good. Well, next week we will have Mike Buchheister, who is a host of the Man Hour on YouTube. Dear listener, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Good night, everybody. Thanks again, Mr. Keith Engle.